Morning. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Zach, and I, for several years, taught pre-calculus in what's called a flipped format. And the basics of a flipped learning format, for those of you that don't know, is just that your direct instruction, your main lessons or lectures, are on video. And that class, pre-calculus, was by the time but the last iteration of it, when it was in the flipped format, was done semi-asynchronously, which is what I'm envisioning I'll be doing for my classes in 2021, in the 2021 school year, because we're either going to be hybrid or online, at least for the first trimester. So because of that, I thought it might be helpful to share some of the things that I did, some of the ways that my classroom was set up, to give you some advice or some tips or something. Maybe you know all of this, but I thought, you know what, I know some things and it'd be worth sharing, and if it could help some other people, then that would be a good thing. So first of all, let me talk about the structure of the class. Okay, as I said, flipped learning is direct instruction on video. That's the basics. But my class was set up in such a way that students could move through it sort of at their own pace. And I say sort of because I had deadlines for quizzes and tests. I don't know about deadlines. The quizzes and test dates, when they were happening, were set. Okay, so within that framework, so let's say that they know the quiz is on Friday. Monday through Thursday, then, they've got some flexibility for what they're working on in class. So when they're in class, they could be watching an instructional video, working on an assignment, or doing some other activity. And the idea behind this was that if they worked hard, many of them wouldn't need to do any work at home. So it was a way that I could incentivize them to work hard enough to not have to do homework. Now, certainly some of them still did and had to take work home, but the other side of that is I encourage them to watch the video lessons at home because they don't need me there for the video lessons. But if they work on their assignments or the other activities in class, I'm there to help them. Okay? So, it was semi-asynchronous. Quizzes and tests were on certain days, and they had flexibility within that. Okay, so you can see this is what I would do at the beginning of each unit. I would give them this sheet of paper on top of their packet of work, and this is their guide through the unit. All right, so you can see at the left-hand column there, it's got the activity, the video, the task, whatever, the assessment, whatever is going to happen in the unit. It's all listed out there clearly. And then when I handed them, back up a second. When I made the packets, this was on top, and then any paper activity that went along with it was stapled to it. Okay, so I don't know if I have an example here. The degree radian practice worksheet, for example, would have been in the packet. All right, the book assignments are obviously going to come from the textbook. The quizzes I'm giving, and anything that's online, like videos, they would know where to get that. Okay, so they'd get this. They get the packet of all of their work. And on day one, they'd know kind of when the assessments were and at what pace they needed to work through the stuff. A little bit more about this sheet. You see the task. This is just a counter on the left. Those numbers don't mean a lot, except that if you're in class, you could say, everyone look at bullet number 4 or item number 4, and then that's easier than saying page 429 and all the numbers. These problems here are problems that sometimes were part of the assessment, but usually not part of the assignment. And those problems were designed as self-quiz problems. So the odds are in the back of the book, or students can look up any answer on Slater, and what I encourage them to do is try these problems on their own as if they were taking a quiz. So it was sort of like a pre-quiz. I tried to pick problems that were like those that were going to be on the quiz or the test. They could take approach the problem, try it, see how they did by checking their answer. If they didn't understand it, then they knew that they weren't ready for the quiz, and then they should talk to me before the quiz came. Right? Moving to the right, what I encouraged them to do, but I didn't check super closely, but I would occasionally look at as I was floating around the class, is I wanted them to put their understanding of the unit there from 1 to 4. 1 being they're completely lost, and 4 being they understand it very well, or it might have been the other way, but you get the idea. They could also check the date that they completed it, but this date column was really just for mainly for the quiz and test date, so that they could write those in there. And then I gave them a suggested pacing over here on the right. Oh, they could also check off when they were when they got something done. But here's my suggested pacing. So I would say, look, you guys, here's your unit plan. You've got flexibility for when to do this stuff. If you're gone a day, it's not going to be the end of the world, but you can also move ahead. But here's my suggested pacing. So if you want to treat this like a normal class, here's what I'm thinking in my head. Here's what it looks like on my lesson plan. So these you can see over here on this document. This is what my lesson plans look like: day 1, day 2, day 3, or whatever. I still had this, all right? And my lesson plans went from being the concrete, I'm lecturing on this day or whatever, to a more this is what I'm suggesting, the quiz day isn't changing, get ready for it type of approach. So this was the suggested pacing, and students found this really useful, I think, and then that paired with my my lesson plans made things fairly clear for them. And as I'll talk about in a minute, having things simple and clear for your students is really a good idea. Okay, so that covers the structure here. I'm looking at my little cheat sheet. All right, so yeah, and a couple other things. This allowed a lot more differentiated time in class, and to work one-on-one with students or in small groups with students. And another structural thing I'll talk about, and then I'll be done with that, is power-ups. So as part of, in this system, the idea was that if students fell behind, I would know quickly, and I would talk to them and intervene. And if students moved ahead, the question was, what do you do with them? And so I came up with this idea called power-ups. And a power-up is just some sort of activity or higher level thinking problem or set of problems or something like that the students should do if they move ahead. So you can see here's my document that is the guidelines for power-ups. I'm not going to obviously read this whole thing to you, but you can see here are the activities. The activities were quite often Desmos activities, more interesting, sort of more fun, makes you think differently about math type of activities. And the way that I graded these is I said that 1 power-up was required per marking period, and that students should only work on power-ups if they had finished everything else or if they worked on them at home. So again, this was an incentive to get students to work hard in class to hopefully get ahead a little bit and work on the power-ups. And also I wanted these problems to be more interesting and fun so that students didn't totally dread them, although certainly some of them still did. All right, so that was the structure of the class. I want to talk about some tools and then just give you some final advice, and then this video will be done. Some of the tools that I used. So I used Google Classroom as the kind of the home base for everything. Each week on Sunday night I would post a Google Doc which just had the week's lesson plan. So here's what my lesson plans look like for the entire trimester. I would copy 5 days of that onto a separate doc. That'd be the weekly plans posted on Sunday night. So they knew what the suggested pacing was for the week. They knew when quizzes and tests were going to happen and that kind of thing. The other great thing about using a Google Doc is that any digital components of the unit plan, any digital activities or videos or whatever, could all be linked to that Google Doc. So while it was managed through Google Classroom, that lesson plan document was really important. All right. Google Docs was really helpful, obviously, for the linking feature, and you can see how my lesson plans are set up. That was really useful. Edpuzzle is how I tracked students watching the videos. So obviously, if everything's asynchronous, there's a question of how do I know that students watched the video? And the application that I use is Edpuzzle. So you can see here, watch degrees, minutes, seconds video in Edpuzzle, and I could link in Google Classroom straight to the Edpuzzle videos. Edpuzzle just takes YouTube videos and then you paste them in, and then they track whether they track how much of the video students have watched. You can set it so that they can't scrub ahead if you want. And one thing I really liked about it is you could put questions inside of the videos. So you could make the video stop, ask them a question, and then obviously they answer it, and then you get some feedback in that way. Okay? So Edpuzzle was really useful for me being able to track whether they were watching the video lessons or not. Just real quick, video lessons were worth points, but a very small number of points. So it was like 1 point for watching the video and 1 point for each question inside of the video if there was questions. So these were typically 2 to 4 point assignments. Most of my like daily homework assignments, you might say, are 8 points. So that's how I graded those. So Edpuzzle is a great tool, especially in this asynchronous environment. The last tool that I use to make my videos, I use and am using now an application called Camtasia. It's fairly expensive. I got it for free at a conference years ago, and but you don't need to use fancy software. Screencast-O-Matic, I've heard teachers use a lot, but honestly, just using your phone camera, setting it up, buying a cheap tripod and setting it up to record videos is useful. We've all got hover cams now, I think, so using your hover cam to make videos is really fairly straightforward. But if you have questions about that, about how to make videos or whatever, please feel free to reach out to me. The last thing I want to talk about here, just sort of general advice. You really want to err on the side of clarity and simplicity for your students if possible. Think about your parents. Think about your parents that have multiple kids, but even just if they have one kid in school, you want to avoid using a bunch of different websites and applications if you can help it. Or if you're going to use multiple websites and applications, give parents and students kind of a home base, right? So give them either use Google Classroom as the launch pad for everything else, or use your website as a launch pad for everything else, whatever it is. But you want to keep it as simple as possible, and you can link out to other applications, but students need to know, if I need to know what to do today, where do I go every single time, so that it's clear and consistent. Okay, so try to err on the side of simplicity and clarity for students. Think about your workflow. So if you're going to be making a bunch of videos, think about what is the best workflow so that during the school year, when I don't have a bunch of time, not that you have a lot of time now, but during the school year when you're really short on time, how can I make a video quickly? And once you've established your workflow, when it becomes time to make a video, you know exactly what you're going to do. You're going to set up your tripod, you're going to make sure that it's after school and that your door is locked or whatever, and then you're going to set up your projector if you need it, or set up your hover cam, record, you're going to put it on YouTube. You get the workflow down so that you don't have to think about that during the school year. So take this time before the school year to figure that out, and figure out like applications that you're going to use. You want all that stuff set up as early as possible so that you can just slide into it when you need to do those things during the year. Don't get hung up on fancy stuff, so don't worry about fancy applications and that kind of thing. Your phone is a really powerful tool. We already sort of talked about that. And then just one little note on video length. You want to try and keep your videos between 5 and 15 minutes long. I've found that a 15-minute video is pretty long, even for seniors and in AP Calc. And so the shorter that you can make them, the better. One other little bit of advice. Remember that these are not full lessons that you're putting on video. You don't need to, where you might, like in math, you might do 3 or 4 examples of a certain type of problem, or even 2 or 3. You maybe only need 1 of that type in your video, because they can pause, they can rewind, and that kind of thing. So you're not so worried about students missing the one example and having to see it multiple times. And also, hopefully, you've got more differentiated or individual time as well. Although we'll see how that shakes out in the online environment. So anyway, that's sort of what my pre-calculus class looked like when it was sort of at peak flipped, you might say. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them. I hope you found this somewhat valuable, and otherwise, good luck this school year.